Hashtag the twins of silence. After giving birth to my twins, my husband humiliated me saying, "Those bastards aren't of my blood, they don't deserve my surname." I just smiled, and minutes later the doctor entered with a DNA test saying, "Actually, if there's something you need to know, those children are not mine, they don't deserve my surname. They are bastards." Nobody breathed. The maternity ward froze. The nurses stopped moving. One of them even gripped the scalpel tighter without realizing it. The only one who didn't seem affected was her, Emily. She was 27 years old with eyes full of light, though the rest of her body was defeated. Her skin, pale from hours of labor, still glistened with sweat. She had just given birth to 2 babies who cried with strength, claiming life, while she looked at them as someone who finds meaning in everything. Her lips, cracked from clenching her teeth so hard, curved into a serene smile. There was no hatred, no tears, just a disconcerting calm. Emily came from a neighborhood forgotten by everyone, except by hunger. Her mother raised her alone after her father disappeared without a trace, leaving them debts, fear, and a house with leaks. She never had luxuries or education, but she always had dreams. One of them was to form a different family, without screaming or slammed doors. When she met Robert, she thought destiny was finally returning something to her. Robert arrived an hour after the birth. White shirt stained with sweat, collar open, eyes full of fury. He didn't even look at the babies. He walked directly toward Emily, as if he were a judge, and she the accused. "And you have the nerve to look me in the face," he spat without lowering his voice. The nurse beside him opened her eyes in horror. Nobody understood what was happening. "You're late," Emily said in a low voice, without stopping looking at the little ones sleeping in her arms. "Late," he said. "Your lie is what's late." Robert turned toward the doctors. "I want a test. I'm not going to allow those brats to carry my surname without knowing if they're really mine." The resident doctor wanted to intervene, but Emily raised her hand. "It's okay," she said with a calm that seemed rehearsed. "Let them do the test." Everyone expected a different reaction. A newly delivered mother, insulted in public by the father of her children, should have screamed, cried, begged. Emily did none of that. She just kept her gaze fixed on Robert, as if her eyes knew something nobody else knew. The nurses exchanged uncomfortable glances. One of them, young, dared to say, "Sir, please, this isn't the time." "You shut up," Robert snapped, losing the little composure he had left. "If these children aren't mine, I'm not going to raise another man's children." The silence fell again like a wet blanket, and in the midst of that tension, one of the babies stopped crying, opened his eyes for the first time, and seemed to look directly at Robert. He stepped back half a step, as if the child had touched him without moving. "Look at him," Emily whispered. "He has your nose." "Lies," Robert shouted. He could belong to anyone. "I know what you did." Emily closed her eyes, held the twins tighter against her chest. Even so, she smiled. That smile disconcerted everyone. It wasn't mockery or resignation. It was as if she knew time was on her side, as if she had already seen all this in her mind before it happened. The head doctor, a man with a gray beard and sunken eyes, entered the room at that instant. He looked at everyone seriously. The atmosphere was so tense that anyone would have thought he was going to announce a tragedy. "There's something you need to know," he said in a grave tone. And there everything was cut off. An assistant burst in announcing that another patient was convulsing in the adjacent room. The doctor apologized and ran out. The tension remained suspended, unresolved, like a rope about to break. Robert breathed agitated, as if he had run an emotional marathon. He ran his hands through his hair, messing it up more than it already was. "This doesn't end here," he muttered before leaving without looking at anyone. A nurse wanted to stop him. Emily shook her head. "Let him go." The door slammed shut. Only then did the sound of the babies fill the room again. Emily hugged them tighter. Her mother, Margaret, entered minutes later. A robust woman, with a tired face and hands hardened by years of cleaning other people's houses. She approached the edge of the bed with eyes full of love. "Their beautiful daughter, just like you and him?" asked Emily without looking at her. "Like you," her mother insisted. "Because you're the one who's going to raise them. You're the one who's going to fight for them." Emily nodded without saying a word. Inside her, a storm was unleashing in silence. The exhaustion from childbirth was nothing compared to the pain that being betrayed by the one she thought would protect her caused her. But there was also fire, a fire that didn't burn to destroy, but to resist. That night, while everyone slept in the hospital, Emily stayed awake. She watched her children as if they were 2 sacred pieces of a puzzle she didn't yet fully understand. She knew the road would be hard. She knew Robert wouldn't stop, and most seriously, she knew something she hadn't told anyone yet. Because days before, when she began to feel something wasn't right during pregnancy, she went to a specialized clinic. There, a doctor spoke to her about a genetic possibility, something improbable, but not impossible. The studies were sent to another country. The results arrived just the morning of delivery. She didn't open them, didn't want to do it alone. Now she understood why she had smiled. At dawn, the same gray-bearded doctor returned to the room. His face was a mixture of exhaustion and urgency. He asked to speak with Emily privately, but Margaret didn't move. "Whatever you have to say it here," the mother ordered. The doctor looked at Emily seeking approval. She nodded. "The results arrived, but they're not just about the DNA test," he said in a low voice. "There's something else, something more delicate." Emily closed her eyes. The moment had arrived. "We'll discuss it when Robert is present," she responded. The doctor wanted to object, but understood it wasn't the time. "I'll return later," he said before leaving. Margaret approached and caressed her daughter's hair. Emily finally let a tear fall. "I'm going to need strength, Mom." "Do you have it?" her mother answered. "You always had it, you just have to use it now." Hours later, Robert returned. He didn't come alone. His mother accompanied him, a haughty, elegant woman, with the look of someone who believes herself above everyone. "Now, what do you want?" she said, barely crossing the door. "More shame, please." "Please show respect," intervened the doctor who had just returned. "This isn't a trial, it's a medical matter." "Medical would be sterilizing this class of women," she said without thinking. Emily didn't respond, just looked at her children. The doctor took a deep breath, stood firm in the middle of everyone. "The DNA test confirms that Robert is the biological father of both children," he announced. Nobody said anything. Robert's mother paled. Robert remained still. Emily looked at him without joy, without hatred. Just truth. "But that's not all," the doctor continued. "There's something else you need to know." And there again time seemed to stop. The twins present a rare genetic alteration. It only activates if both parents share a very specific recessive gene. Everyone fell silent. "What does that mean?" asked Margaret. The doctor searched for words. "It means that both parents, without knowing it, carried a mutation that when united activated a serious condition in the babies. We're still studying the scope." Robert's mother brought a hand to her mouth. Robert stepped back. Emily just lowered her head. "Is it serious?" Robert whispered. "It could be," the doctor answered. "We'll need deeper studies. It's an extremely rare disease." "It has a cure," Emily insisted. "There's no cure yet," the doctor responded. "But there are treatments, some experimental, requiring resources and family unity." The words remained floating in the room. Nobody knew how to continue after that. Robert's mother left without saying a word. Robert looked at Emily, at the babies, then at the floor. "I didn't know," he stammered. Emily said nothing, looked at him directly. That look didn't ask for forgiveness nor offer it. It was a silent sentence. "I told you," she finally murmured. "But you preferred to believe what was convenient for you." The doctor withdrew. Margaret took the babies to feed them. Emily was left alone with Robert. "What are you going to do now?" she asked. He took time to respond. When he did, his words sounded more like a whisper than a decision. "I don't know." Emily turned her face toward the window. Outside, the sky was beginning to cloud over. It wasn't a metaphor, it was a warning. Meanwhile, in the waiting room, two nurses spoke in low voices. "Did you see how she smiled after everything he said?" "Yes." It was as if she knew the ending wasn't written yet, or as if she had already read it. And they were right. Emily's smile wasn't just resistance, it was a premonition, because what was about to come would change everything. Emily's silence lasted exactly until the hospital door closed again. Robert had left without looking back, carrying a mixture of disbelief and guilt that was just beginning to be born in him. But she didn't move. She continued sitting on that bed with her arms covering her twins, as if they were the last truth she had left in the world, and in a way they were. The sound of the smaller babies' breathing broke the quiet like a clock that never stops, marking each second with painful precision. Margaret, Emily's mother, watched in silence from the corner without intervening. She understood that her daughter needed a few minutes alone, with her thoughts, with that quiet fire that was born from deep within her. Dr. Williams entered discreetly. She approached with a folder in her hand, and an expression that tried to hide the gravity of what she couldn't yet say aloud. "We'll keep them under observation, Emily. We're going to start complementary studies. We're going to do everything in our power." Emily nodded. She didn't cry. She caressed the forehead of one of the babies who slept with a furrowed brow, as if he already knew his life wouldn't be easy. How long do they have to stay here? Minimum 5 days. We need to rule out other possible causes. I don't want to tell you anything until we have solid results. Thank you, doctor. Margaret approached upon hearing that. What do we do, daughter? Should I bring you anything? Do you want me to stay? Stay only. Don't tell me everything will be okay. I don't want lies. Margaret lowered her gaze. She understood. Truth was a right that life had taken from her daughter too many times. Now, more than ever, she needed every word that reached her to carry the exact weight of reality. The next day, Robert didn't appear, nor the next, nor the following. The 4th day, the duty nurse arrived with an envelope for Emily. It carried the logo of a law firm. Upon opening it, she found what she least expected: a notification. Robert was requesting additional paternity tests. He was also demanding that his rights as a father be reviewed judicially. What is this? Emily asked the nurse, as if the paper in her hands couldn't be real. A messenger left it this morning. Margaret read it in silence. Upon finishing, her face was red, but not with shame. It was something else. It was contained rage. It was the pain of a mother who sees her daughter swallow another betrayal. He's following his father's footsteps, Margaret said with a harsh voice. Emily didn't respond. She got up with difficulty, went to the window, and breathed deeply. The city moved outside as if nothing was happening, as if she weren't holding a world that was falling apart second by second. That night she couldn't sleep. Between medical uncertainty and legal threat, her body gave up. Tears began to fall without permission, silent, while she tried to express milk with a manual pump someone from the hospital had lent her. She cried because it hurt, because the milk wouldn't come out, because her breasts were full but empty at the same time, and because she knew nobody was going to save her. That feeling was the most brutal of all. 3 days later they were discharged. She returned home. A small old house in a neighborhood where water was cut every 2 days and electricity failed with every storm, but it was her refuge. There her mother, her sister Sarah, and her brother-in-law David were waiting for her. Each did what they could to help, though money wasn't enough even for diapers. In the weeks that followed, Emily became everything she could be: mother, nurse, cook, guardian. She learned to sleep in 30-minute fragments. She learned to read temperature by just touching her children's foreheads. She learned to cry silently, so the babies wouldn't hear her. Sarah tried to help, but sometimes her advice hurt more than it consoled. You have to ask for what belongs to you, Emily. He's the father, let him take responsibility. What good is having the surname if there's no love? She responded. It's useful when you have to pay for medicines, diapers, doctors. Emily didn't respond, kept silent. There was something more that made her distrust, something in the way Robert had acted, and something she still didn't dare tell anyone. One afternoon, while washing bottles in the patio sink, she remembered her father, that figure who entered the house dragging his feet with red eyes and broken character. She remembered him shouting at her mother for not having food ready, remembered him hitting the table, throwing plates, closing doors like someone who wants the world to know he has no control over anything. And she remembered him leaving without saying goodbye, without looking back. She also remembered her promise. I'm not going to repeat this, she had told herself at just 13 years old. I'm not going to raise children with fear. The promise stuck in her throat like a truth that was hard to sustain. But then she returned to the interior of the house, looked at her sleeping children, their pink lips, their trembling little hands, and understood that she could still fulfill it, because staying, resisting, was her way of breaking the cycle. Days passed like blades. Each day was a race against exhaustion and helplessness. And as if all that wasn't enough, another letter arrived, this time from a family court. Robert's mother had initiated a request to review custody, arguing that the children were at risk due to Emily's economic environment. I can't believe it, Sarah shouted. They're telling you that you can't take care of them. Emily took the sheet in her hands. She didn't tremble, didn't cry anymore, just breathed deeply. They think with money they can erase what they are. You can't let them take them from you, Emily, said her mother. You can't. I won't, she responded. But I'm also not going to lose my soul in a legal war. Then what are you going to do? I'm going to fight, but in my own way. That night, while breastfeeding in the penumbra, one of the babies complained with a strange moan. At first she thought it was colic. Then she noticed he had a fever. She checked him with her hands, wrapped him in blankets, sang to calm him, but he didn't improve. Hours later, the second baby started with the same symptoms. Emily didn't wait. She left in the early morning to the hospital with her mother, holding a blanket, and her sister carrying the backpack with medications. They walked fast, breathed with anxiety. Each block seemed longer. Upon arriving at emergency, the doctors acted without delay. They took the children and began doing studies. She had to stay outside. More than 2 hours passed. When Dr. Williams finally came out, her face didn't bring good news. "They're stable for now. What's wrong with them?" Emily asked without beating around the bush. "It's not a simple virus. The symptoms coincide with what we feared. The genetic mutation they both carry is beginning to manifest." "What does that mean?" Sarah intervened on the verge of collapse. "Their bodies aren't producing enough defenses. Their immune systems are compromised. We're going to have to admit them again." Emily felt her legs failing. Her mother held her by the arm, but she stayed standing. "What kind of disease is it?" The doctor looked at her seriously. "It's a primary immunodeficiency, rare, dangerous, and very expensive to treat." Emily nodded as if she already knew it, as if that was the missing piece in her mind to close the circle. The children were admitted immediately. That night, Emily slept again in a chair with her head resting against the white hospital wall. She listened to the beeping of machines, the hurried steps of nurses, the sighs of other mothers as alone as she was. And while the world spun mercilessly, in her heart a new certainty was born. The surname didn't matter, the trial didn't matter, the betrayal didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was that those children lived, and she would do whatever was necessary to achieve it. That night, while the hospital corridors vibrated with a constant echo of steps, doors, and electronic monitors, Emily didn't move from the chair. Her swollen feet and exhausted body were clear signs that she should rest, but her soul was lit as if it refused to turn off while her children fought for their lives. Hours passed slowly. Each beep, each alarm sound, each hurried voice of a doctor on the other side of the corridor was like a shake to her heart. In one of those eternal hours, Dr. Williams returned. She wore the same white coat as always, but now with red eyes and hands clutching a folder with more force than necessary. "Emily, can I speak with you?" She stood without saying anything. Her body knew that the words about to come out wouldn't be easy to hear. They walked toward a small room, without windows, where the smell of chlorine couldn't cover the tension in the environment. The doctor sat in front of her. "We're worried. The blood results from the twins are out of the ordinary." "What do they have?" Emily asked with a dry throat. "We still don't know for certain, but there are patterns that point to something more complex than a simple infection. There are signs of immunodeficiency, something genetic." "What does that mean?" "It means they were probably born with an error in their defense system, something that doesn't allow them to fight diseases that other children would overcome without problem. We need to do more specific tests, and for that we need genetic samples from the father." Robert's name fell on the table like a stone in water. Emily pressed her lips. She no longer had tears. What she had was a dry, sharp determination. "And if he refuses? Then the studies will remain incomplete, and any treatment we give will be a blind attempt." The doctor left the folder on the table and interlaced her fingers. "We need to know what those children carry in their blood. What you gave them, what he also gave them." Emily left the room with her mind spinning. She walked to the waiting room. She dialed Robert's number with trembling pulse. She knew he wouldn't answer, but she tried anyway. Once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th he answered. "What do you want?" he said without filters. "I don't need you to believe me. I need you to save them." Silence. Are they sick?" Robert asked as if suddenly something in his chest had ignited. "Yes." Another pause. "We need your blood sample. There's something in their bodies that isn't working, and it could be because of something you also have." "Are you saying it's my fault?" "No. I'm saying they're your children, and if you don't do this they could die." The line remained mute for a few seconds. Then Robert breathed hard. "All right, I'll go." He hung up without saying goodbye. Emily returned to the babies. One of them slept restlessly with small spasms. The other barely had strength to open his eyes. The nurse told her that specialists were coordinating a new series of studies. She sat between the 2 incubators and placed a hand on each glass. It was her way of promising them that everything was going to improve. The next day, Robert arrived. He dressed as always. White shirt, expensive watch, and that look of someone who always believed himself above others. But something in his eyes was different. Less judgment, more confusion. He didn't enter alone. His mother accompanied him. She didn't say a word, just stayed in the back as if she feared the place would stick to her clothes. Dr. Williams received them. She explained the procedure, the need to sign authorizations, the the urgency of the tests. Robert signed without asking questions. His mother murmured something under her breath that nobody managed to understand. After the procedure, Robert was taken to the room where the twins were. He stood in front of the glass, not knowing whether to enter or not. "Why are they looking at me like that?" he asked. "Because they're recognizing you," Emily answered from behind him. "Because they feel that something of you lives inside them, even though you don't want to see it." Robert said nothing. He stayed there, watching the children while the machines marked their vital signs. "If this is my fault," he murmured, "I don't know if I'll be able to handle it." "It's not about blame," Emily said. "It's about responsibilities. It's about doing the right thing, even if you don't know how. Even if you don't feel prepared, even if your legs tremble." "Do you hate me?" he said without taking his eyes off the babies. "I don't have time for that," she responded. "I don't have energy to waste on resentments. Everything I have is for them." Robert closed his eyes. When he opened them, something in his face had changed. Just a little enough. Hours later, the doctor returned with preliminary results. Confirmed. Both parents carry a recessive gene that when combined has generated a mutation. An extremely rare genetic disease. It doesn't have a common name yet or definitive treatment, but there are ongoing investigations in other countries, clinical studies possibilities. "Can they live with this?" Emily asked. "With constant medical attention, with immunological support, and if we're lucky, with some advanced therapy that might arrive in time." "And if it doesn't arrive?" The doctor didn't respond, lowered her gaze, and that silence was crueler than any word. Robert stayed at the hospital that night, not by decision, but because he couldn't move. He sat in a chair by the window and watched the hours pass while images of the children connected to machines, fighting to breathe, repeated in his head. At dawn, Emily approached him with 2 coffees a nurse had offered them. "You don't have to stay," she said. "I don't want to leave," he answered. For the first time they didn't argue, didn't throw sharp words at each other. They just shared the silence. When the sun began to filter through the windows, Robert got up and walked toward one of the incubators. He placed his hand on the glass, then with determination entered, put on the protective equipment and approached one of the babies. Carefully he extended a finger. The baby, still weak, moved his little hand and placed it on his. Robert felt a tremor in his chest, not from fear, but from an emotion he couldn't name. He left the room without saying anything. He walked through the corridors as if he were leaving a sacred place. Emily watched him from afar. Something inside her told her that that night something small, very small, had begun to change. But she didn't lower her guard. There were still truths that hadn't been told. There were still open wounds. There was still blood that hid secrets. Robert didn't know how much time had passed since his finger touched his son's little hand. That instant, though brief, remained engraved with more force than all the years he had been carrying his family's surname. As he left the hospital with the breeze hitting his face, for the first time in a long time, he felt something inside him beginning to crack. He didn't return directly home. He drove aimlessly, with his knuckles tense on the steering wheel. Emily's words came back again and again to his mind. "I don't need you to believe me. I need you to save them." She hadn't insulted him, hadn't blamed him, and yet he felt a weight falling on him that neither money, nor surname, nor time could remove from his shoulders. When he arrived at the building where he lived, he found his mother in the living room. She was drinking coffee as always, with her feet crossed on the sofa and a fashion magazine in her hands. "What face are you bringing now?" she asked without looking at him. Robert didn't respond immediately. He went to the kitchen, served himself a glass of water, drank it all in one gulp, and returned. "They're mine," he said with a dry voice. The woman lowered the magazine slowly. "How do you know?" "Genetics don't lie. Women do." Emily didn't. "Oh, please. Do you think that girl wanted you for love? Do you know how many times I saw her sister looking at you as if you were salvation?" Robert felt something in his chest tighten. "What are you talking about?" "That family lives by looking for men with surnames. Don't play naive." He looked at her with a mixture of repulsion and bewilderment. "You told me Emily had someone else, that you had seen him, that you had proof. And you needed proof. It was enough to look at her. Look at where she lives, how she dresses, what education she has. Did you really think a woman like that would be satisfied with just one man?" Robert took 2 steps toward her. For an instant, tension filled the air like a taut rope that could break with a sigh. "You ruined me, Mom. I saved you from a bigger ruin." "No, you ruined me. You made me distrust the only person who really loved me." And then he remembered. He remembered the fleeting looks, Sarah's absences, the times Emily stayed home with her mother, and Sarah found excuses to appear near him. One particular night stuck in his memory like a forgotten fragment that suddenly returned with force. He had been drinking. He argued with Emily. Sarah appeared too kind, too quick, and he too vulnerable. Shame clouded his vision. That night he didn't sleep. The next day he returned to the hospital. The children remained connected to machines more stable. Emily was there, exhausted but firm. She saw him enter without saying a word. He sat in front of her, lowered his head. "I have to tell you something." She said nothing, just waited. "I failed you because I believed my mother. She told me that you had probably gotten involved with another for money. She filled me with doubts, made me distrust, and I, instead of talking to you, filled myself with rage." Emily breathed deeply, without looking away. "Yes, I know. I always knew you didn't think for yourself. You just repeated what was convenient for you." Robert raised his head. "That's not all." Emily crossed her arms. "Then say it once and for all." "There was a night. I was confused. We had argued. I was drinking. Sarah appeared. She remained completely still." "Don't continue," Emily said. "Don't continue," she repeated more firmly. "You believed all that and still you slept with my sister." The slap was as quick as it was inevitable. It wasn't from rage, it was from dignity, from pain, from accumulated betrayal. Robert didn't defend himself, didn't step back, stayed standing with his cheek burning and moist eyes. Emily trembled. Her entire body seemed about to break. At that moment the door opened. Sarah entered with uncertain steps. She had heard everything from the corridor. "Emily, it was a mistake. It wasn't planned. It was just once." "Just once," Emily whispered. "And what was it for you? Revenge? Jealousy? Pity?" Sarah lowered her gaze. "It was weakness. It was rage. You were always the strong one, the good one, the one everyone admired. I just wanted someone to look at me like they looked at you. And so you chose the man who was supposed to be the father of my children." Sarah didn't answer. She limited herself to bringing a hand to her belly. "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was colder than any winter. Margaret appeared at the door behind Sarah without understanding what was happening. "What's going on here?" Emily didn't respond. She left the room without looking at anyone. She walked through the corridors until reaching the waiting room. She let herself fall into a chair. She trembled. Margaret reached her. "What happened?" "My sister. My own sister." She couldn't continue. Margaret hugged her daughter tightly. She knew the pain she felt had no name. For 2 days, Emily didn't want to see anyone, only stayed with her children. She barely spoke, ate little, slept less, moved like a shadow. Her mind repeated again and again each word, each image, each wound. She thought about leaving the children with her mother, about disappearing, but then she saw them sleeping, fragile, innocent, and knew that if she fell, they would have no one. The third night, Robert returned. He had quit his job, sold his car, closed his accounts. He didn't say anything, just sat next to Emily, passed her a folder with signed documents. "Everything I have is for them now. I'll do what you can't, what you don't want. I'm not apologizing. You can't ask forgiveness for something like this, but I can try to repair, even if you don't believe me capable." Emily looked at him, said nothing, didn't throw him out either. Robert stayed all night. That dawn Dr. Williams's phone rang. It was a call from a research center in Australia. They had reviewed the twins' case. They were conducting a clinical study with a new treatment. They needed more information, but there was a possibility. Small, difficult, distant, but real. The doctor entered the hospital that morning with a mixture of excitement and caution. "Emily, Robert, I have something to tell you. There might be an opportunity." And for the first time in a long time, Emily felt that the word hope stopped being a cruel joke, because even in the deepest wounds, sometimes life can grow. Dr. Williams spoke with shining eyes and a mixture of prudence and contained emotion. The Australian Clinical Centre had studied the case in detail. The genetic combination affecting the twins was compatible with a new medical trial that was still in experimental phase. It wasn't a guaranteed cure. It was a possibility. A tiny window in the middle of a storm. "They're asking for an urgent evaluation, Emily. If the children qualify, we could have a path. They don't promise anything, but it's more than we've had until now." Emily could barely hold the coffee she had in her hands. She felt the air weighed more than before. Her children, still with fever, slept connected to machines. Her mother, seated in a corner, crossed herself in silence. Robert said nothing at first, just nodded. Then he left the room, dialed a number on his mobile, and spoke for several minutes with someone from his former company. He asked for a favor owed by an overseas executive. In less than an hour, he had tickets for the three of them. They would leave in 48 hours. Emily didn't ask where the money had come from, not because she didn't care, but because she was beyond curiosity. She was in mother mode, pure survival. That same night they began preparing papers, coordinated with the embassy, got medical authorizations. Margaret stayed home with Sarah, who still avoided making eye contact with her sister. Upon arriving at the airport, Emily felt a stab in her stomach, not from fear of flying, but from uncertainty about what awaited them on the other side of the continent. It was the first time she had left the country. She was going with her sick children, with a man who had destroyed her trust, and with a wounded love that no longer knew if it could revive. The plane landed in Sydney after more than 15 hours. The hospital received them with a completely prepared medical team. They had reserved an isolated room to evaluate the twins and take new samples. During the first days, everything was a whirlwind of analyses, studies, interviews, questions. Emily slept little, Robert almost nothing. The doctors spoke with caution. They said the experimental protocol required a compatible donor, someone who shared a very specific genetic profile with the children. It was a needle in a haystack, but not impossible. The day they received the results, the Australian doctor leading the clinical trial entered the room with an expression impossible to read. She sat in front of Emily and Robert. Her tone was soft, but her message devastating. "We found a compatible donor." Emily felt a ray of relief run through her body. Robert exhaled as if he hadn't breathed in days. "Where is she?" Emily asked. The doctor hesitated before responding. "The donor is a 12-year-old minor. She lives in Melbourne. Her name is Grace. By protocol, we had to investigate the genetic links between her and your children. And in doing the traceability, we discovered something more." Robert noticed the change in environment. He tensed. "What did you discover?" The doctor took out a document, slid it on the table. "Grace is the biological daughter of Mr. Robert Mitchell." The silence that followed was absolute. Emily felt the floor moving under her. She didn't scream it. She didn't cry, just looked at him. Fixed, frozen. "What are you talking about?" Robert said incredulously. "Genetic markers don't lie. This girl was born 12 years ago. Her mother had a relationship with you during a business visit you made to Australia. She signed with a different name, but she kept proof of paternity. She never claimed anything. She didn't contact you by her own decision, feared exposure." "How? How are you sure?" The woman presented herself voluntarily when she knew her daughter was compatible. "She saw the case on social media. She recognized your surname. We confirmed the information. She didn't do it for revenge, sir. She did it for the life of these children." Emily stood up from the chair. Her hands trembled. Her look was no longer reproach. It was something else, something deeper, a disappointment as old as time. "How many lives did you destroy while playing at being a man?" Emily whispered. "I didn't know. I swear to you, I had no idea. It was years ago. There was no contact afterward. It doesn't matter anymore." She left the room. She walked down the corridor with slow steps. Each step was another stone on her back. Robert went after her, but stopped halfway. He knew he had no right to ask for understanding. He knew it and still wanted to do it. The following days were tense. Grace arrived at the hospital with her mother, a simple woman, with honest eyes and the expression of someone who has survived without resentments. She presented herself to Emily with respect. "I'm not coming to claim anything," she told her. "I just want your children not to lose their brothers." "They're not brothers," Emily responded with a dry voice. "Maybe they're not by your decision, but they are by blood. And you're not to blame. Neither am I, but they aren't either." Emily lowered her gaze. She understood the weight of those words, though her heart wasn't yet ready to accept them. Grace showed herself calm, brave. Her mother explained the risks to her. The procedure wasn't lethal, but it was demanding. It could affect her health, could have complications. Despite that, Grace accepted. She said she wanted to help, that she felt she should do it. That night, Emily and Robert remained alone in the waiting room. The silence between them was heavier than before. "I was never a good man," he said. Emily didn't respond. "But I want to be a good father. I don't know if I can. I don't know if I'll achieve it, but I'm here. Not out of guilt, out of love." Emily looked at him for the first time in days. Sometimes love arrives too late, and sometimes just in time to save what's left. They didn't speak more. The next morning, Grace was prepared for the procedure. The doctors explained everything again. There were signatures, protocols, silence. Robert accompanied her to the room, held her hand. He didn't know what to tell her, just repeated her name as if it were an apology. Hours later, when the procedure concluded, the head doctor came out with a tense face. "She's stable, but her pressure dropped a lot. We're going to need intensive monitoring." Emily felt relief mixing with fear. "And the babies reacted well to the compatibility." "It's early to know, but there's hope." And at that moment, for the first time since everything began, Robert broke down. He fell to his knees, covering his face. Not from shame, from truth, because love when it arrives late hurts more, but it can also save what we thought was lost, even ourselves. Robert remained on his knees much longer than his body could handle, not for drama, but because he had finally surrendered. He had stopped fighting against guilt, against his pride, against everything that for years served as a shield to avoid facing what he was. The tears were no longer a symbol of defeat, but the inevitable consequence of seeing the damage he had sown. Emily said nothing. She was a few steps away with her back straight, and her gaze on the corridor where doctors attended to Grace. She didn't cry. She was too empty for that. She still didn't know if she should feel relief for the possible medical advance, or if she should prepare for another blow. Her heart was divided between her children and the girl, who without knowing it carried in her blood the key that could change everything. That night the tension grew as if the air had memory. Grace had begun to have adverse symptoms to the procedure. Nothing extreme, but enough to raise alarms. Her mother, Linda, demanded answers. When the head doctor tried to explain the side effects and protocols to her, she cut the conversation with a single gesture. She entered the room, looked at her sleeping daughter, connected to a monitor, and then came out looking for Robert. She found him in the waiting room, still not moving. She looked at him with that mixture of maternal love and contained fury that only an abandoned mother can sustain for years. "So now it hurts you?" Linda asked. Robert looked at her, stood up, and nodded. "I didn't come to defend myself." "You better not." Linda breathed deeply. She crossed her arms. "I didn't know if I should bring her. I didn't have to, but she insisted. She didn't even know who you were and still wanted to help. And you just disappeared. I was going to return. I thought about going back to write to you, but months passed years. And you became a coward." Robert lowered his gaze. He didn't justify himself. He had no excuses left. The compatibility was good, but not sufficient. "They need more," Linda said with a dry voice. "Another extraction, more risk. The doctors say her body can resist it, but they don't guarantee it." Emily, who had heard part of the conversation from afar, approached slowly. Her face had that expression that only mothers know when a child's life depends on someone else. "Please," she said, "I'm not asking you to forgive him or understand him. I also raised alone. I also faced nights without knowing if my children would still be breathing the next day. But you can do something I can't. You can save others." Linda looked at her with glassy eyes. For the first time she saw in Emily another mother, not the woman who was with the man who abandoned her. She lowered her gaze, breathed deeply. "The condition is only one," she said without beating around the bush. "He has to publicly recognize Grace. Not on paper, not in a courthouse. He has to tell the world that he abandoned her, that he ignored her, that she existed and he did nothing." Robert swallowed saliva, his hands trembled, not from fear of exposure, but because that confession stripped him completely. "I'll do it," he responded, "not out of obligation. For her, for my children, for me." Linda nodded without expression. "You have 24 hours. Emily approached Robert, who could barely stand. "Do it," she told him. "Not for me, for them." He nodded. That same night, Robert recorded a video with the help of a volunteer communicator from the hospital. He didn't want a script, didn't want cuts. He looked at the camera with red eyes, broken voice, and soul laid bare. "My name is Robert Mitchell," he began, "and I come to tell the truth. I was a coward, a selfish person. I abandoned a girl who was born from a night I forgot too quickly. I hid behind my surname, my money, my fears. But she exists. Her name is Grace. She's 12 years old, and today she's fighting for the life of 2 children she doesn't even know. Neither she nor her mother owe me anything. I'm the one who owes them everything, and that's why from today I give her my name, my support, my presence, and above all my forgiveness to her and to myself." The video was published by Grace's mother on social media. It didn't take long to go viral. Some applauded the courage, others criticized the exposure, many shared messages of reflection. But deep down, what really moved was a silent conversation about abandonment, forgiveness, and the invisible wounds that many families drag without speaking. The hospital received calls from media, interview requests, offers of help, but Emily refused to turn her pain into spectacle. She only asked for privacy. 2 days later, the second phase of the procedure was performed. This time Grace was sedated for longer. The extraction was more delicate. Her pressure dropped drastically during the first minutes, but the doctors managed to stabilize her. Robert didn't separate from her, held her hand with a delicacy he had never shown before. Linda, seated beside, didn't say a word, just observed him in silence, trying to understand if that man had really changed or if he was just trapped by guilt. Meanwhile, in another room of the hospital, the twins began to show signs of improvement. The defense level increased slightly. The fever began to subside. Dr. Williams, who followed the case from her country, wrote a message for Emily. The results are promising. Don't sing victory but feel proud. You're saving your children with love and courage. Emily read the message and smiled. For the first time, she smiled without effort. That night, Robert asked to leave the hospital for a few hours. He took a taxi toward the outskirts of the city. He arrived at a small cemetery with old tombs and dried flowers. He stopped in front of a modest headstone with his surname carved in stone. There was buried his father, a man he had sworn not to resemble. A man who had lived with closed fists and a tight heart. Robert hadn't returned since the funeral. I failed you, he said in a low voice. I judged you all my life and ended up doing worse things. I let fear decide for me. I let others speak for me, and now I'm picking up the pieces. He closed his eyes. But I'm not going to continue the same, not for you, for them, because if pain teaches something, it's that living without being brave isn't worth it. He left a flower on the tomb, crossed himself, and returned to the hospital. Upon entering, he found Emily asleep, seated next to the babies. Both breathed calmly. Robert approached in silence, looked at them, and understood that he didn't need redemption. He needed presence, action, and above all, humility. Because love isn't said, it's demonstrated even when it already seems late. 5 years can change everything or can change nothing. In Emily's case, they changed everything. And not because life became perfect, nor because pain disappeared, but because she learned to look differently. She learned that not all silences are synonymous with abandonment. Some silences also heal, also embrace. The twins, Ethan and Gabriel, ran through the school playground with their backpacks half closed, shoes full of dirt, and laughter intact. Their voices mixed with those of other children, but for Emily each one was unmistakable. She knew how to recognize them even with her eyes closed, and she did. Every time she heard them laugh, her eyes moistened without permission. It wasn't sadness, it was something else. It was gratitude for the miracle of time. The treatment in Australia worked beyond expectations. The immunological therapies had strengthened the children to the point of allowing them to lead a practically normal life. They still needed checkups. Yes, they still had medical appointments, but they no longer lived connected to machines. Now they lived connected to childhood. Emily worked as a librarian at a cultural center in the neighborhood. She didn't earn much, but the place had something no salary could offer her: peace. Surrounded by books, by stories, by people who went looking for answers they still didn't know how to formulate. Emily felt useful, complete, and that space with high ceilings and old shelves became her second home. One afternoon they asked her to speak at an event about motherhood and overcoming. She hesitated, not because she didn't want to, but because she still found it hard to see herself from the outside. But she accepted. She arrived with a simple dress, loose hair, and a folder in her hands. The hall was full. Among the audience, Robert occupied a corner. Grace, now a teenager, accompanied him. Sarah, her sister, was also seated next to her daughter. Robert's mother was no longer there. She had died months earlier from natural causes. Her presence, so strong in life, had become absence without echo. But before leaving, she left a letter for Emily. Nobody ever knew what it said. Emily kept it sealed inside a book and never spoke of it. The talk began without elaborate introductions. Emily just stood up, breathed deeply, and looked the audience in the eyes. My name is Emily, and for a time my life was full of silences. Silences that hurt, silences that judged, silences that enclosed truths. But I also learned that some silences heal, not because they hide what hurts, but because they give you the space to learn to speak from another place. She told her story without adornments. She spoke of the hospital, the diagnosis, the rejection, the betrayal. She didn't soften the wounds, didn't look for blame either. She spoke like someone who no longer needs to be believed, just to be heard. When she finished, the silence was total, not from discomfort, but from respect. Then came the applause, not noisy, not theatrical, sincere applause, slow, of those that are born from the chest. After the talk, a woman from the audience approached her. She carried a folder. "Would you like to publish your story?" she asked. Emily hesitated. She had never written beyond her diary, but she accepted. The book was titled The Twins of Silence, and didn't take long to become known. Not for being a scandal story, but for being a real, raw human story. Robert read it in a single night. He cried alone in the kitchen with the book open on the table. He didn't ask for changes, didn't demand his version. He knew that was the truth, hers, the children's, and that he should be there not to correct it, but to sustain it. Sarah, for her part, changed more than anyone imagined. She studied psychology, trained as a family therapist. She dedicated her life to helping women who, like her, had made mistakes but wanted to change. The relationship with Emily was rebuilt slowly. There were no formal apologies, no dramatic conversations, just time, gestures, presence. And in that shared routine, they became sisters again. Sarah's daughter grew up with the twins as if they were her brothers. They played together, took care of each other, shared life. They didn't fully understand what had happened before they were born. They only knew their family was different, and that was okay. Grace visited frequently, sometimes staying weekends, sometimes helping Emily in the library. Other times she went with Robert to the talks he gave at the foundation he had founded, an organization that helped absent fathers reconnect with their children. It wasn't simple work. He listened to stories of broken men, women who no longer wanted to know anything, children who grew up with half a heart. But he was there not to give lessons, but to listen, to share his story, and to demonstrate that although late, it's possible to walk differently. The day the twins turned 7, they organized a party in the park. Nothing luxurious, just a table, balloons, cake, and lots of laughter. Robert was with them all the time, helped serve, ran after the children, blew out the candles with the same emotion as them. At the end of the afternoon, when the sun began to fall and shadows lengthened the games on the grass, Emily and Robert sat on a wooden bench with their eyes on their children. "Do you think all this was worth it?" he asked without looking at her directly. She smiled, not out of courtesy, not out of evasion, but because she already knew the answer for a long time. "It's always worth it when you choose to love, even when it hurts." Robert looked at her, said nothing more. It wasn't necessary. The twins approached, running with red cheeks from so much play. They threw themselves on them, laughing. Robert lifted one in his arms, Emily the other. They hugged them tightly, and for a very brief moment everything stopped. There was no illness, no past, no wounds, just them. A family not perfect, but real. On the last page of the book she wrote, Emily left a reflection she didn't share in her talk. She wrote it alone one night with the lamp on and her heart open. "Life isn't perfect, but it's full of seconds that are worth a lifetime. Some children are born to teach us to be parents, and some pains come to break invisible chains we didn't know we were wearing. Forgive, love, and above all, never be silent when your soul knows the truth, because in the end the only thing that really saves is loving with truth. Even if it costs, even if it burns, even if it arrives late, because love that is chosen, even among ruins, is the only one that really heals." What did you think of this story? There are many people who, like Emily, are living silent battles every day. Our hope is that her voice has also resonated within you. If this story touched your heart, share it. Make more people feel accompanied. Be part of the change. Tell us in the comments what you would have done in her place. From what city are you watching us? Reading you makes us feel closer to you. And if you haven't done it yet, give it a like, subscribe, and activate the bell. Each gesture of yours is a sign that these stories should continue being told. Don't leave yet. Our next moving story is already appearing on your screen. Click on any of them and continue exploring this universe of real, moving, and necessary stories. Thank you for being here. Thank you for feeling with us. We send you a huge hug wherever you are. See you in the next one.